Whitewater or Watergate? I'm Michael Smerconish. This week in San Francisco, Signalgate is the story of the week. Amidst the tumult of the last 60 days, it's the scandal of the nascent Trump administration. But whether it takes a lasting toll on the White House, that remains to be seen. My starting point in assessing such scandals has been whether the story pervades, largely a function of its ability to condense to a soundbite and be understood by an American public with limited bandwidth. Whitewater, that was a complicated land deal in Arkansas that nobody could follow. Watergate, a burglary, something none of us wants to have happen at home. Signalgate, an unsecure chat among White House war planners, definitely more in the Watergate category in terms of its ability to be understood. Anybody with a smartphone gets it. So what does history tell us about how this may play out? In 1972, President Nixon's men broke into the DNC headquarters at the Watergate Hotel. The crime and the subsequent cover-up led to his resignation in 1974. Since then, every scandal has people speculating whether this will be the one that topples the administration. As a side note, it all has meant that scandal has been attached to the word gate ever since. Maybe after 50 years, we need to stop that practice. Anyway, since Watergate, some presidents have apparently learned how to weather the storm. Iran-Contra, that was considered potentially disastrous, but it was complicated. Again, more Whitewater than Watergate. Ronald Reagan, he wasn't called the Teflon president for nothing. Ronald Reagan spoke to the public on TV. He admitted mistakes. He held firm. He served out his term. The Democrats, of course, have had their own Teflon president, some would say in President Bill Clinton. Whitewater didn't take him down, but that investigation is what led to the intern scandal. Still, he completed a full second term. So what will be the impact of Signalgate on Trump? You might think perilous. After all, the platform should never have been used. The inclusion of a journalist, indeed one hostile to Trump, is evidence of the slipshod nature of the thread. And forget the semantics, whether the leak amounted to war plans, attack plans, or just an overview. It was flat out wrong to use that platform. Lanny Davis, lawyer, crisis manager, former advisor to the Clintons, was my SiriusXM radio guest this week. Lanny wrote an entire book on how best to defend against controversy. Tell it early, tell it all, tell it yourself. None of the principals in Signalgate has done that. Not Mike Waltz, not Pete Hegseth, not their boss, Donald Trump. According to Lanny, if they had, it would probably be behind them by now. Instead, Trump, setting the tone for the administration, called the Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg a sleazeball. As for who's responsible, the buck stops elsewhere.
I think it's a witch hunt. I wasn't involved with it. I wasn't there.
Hegseth, following the same strategy, answered questions by attacking Goldberg's honesty. As far as the leaked text, he emphasized that nobody was texting war plans, so apparently no harm, no foul. Waltz also seemed to believe the best defense is a good offense. On Laura Ingram's program, he attacked Goldberg and repeated talking points about Trump's foreign policy. He did take full responsibility for the leaks, though it's not the kind of responsibility that seems to have any consequences. Former White House speechwriter Peggy Noonan agrees that the Lanny Davis approach would have worked better in this instance. She writes those involved in the scandal should have simply admitted their mistake. Doubling down made them look doubly stupid. Instead, Signalgate has continued to penetrate the national consciousness. But does that mean it slows the breakneck pace of Trump 2.0? Not necessarily. Indeed, recent polls show surprising support for Trump and how he's running things.
According to Marist, 45% say that we're on the right track. That's the second highest that Marist has measured since 2009. How about NBC News? 44%. That's the highest since 2004. Wow. The bottom line is the percentage of Americans who say we're on the right track is through the roof.
There are reasons, perhaps, why we shouldn't be completely surprised. And, of course, we're talking about Donald Trump. He goes beyond Teflon. We need a new polymer to describe him. During his first campaign, he said things almost daily that would make other politicians radioactive, but he seemed to be immune from the normal rules of politics. And since he first took office, there have been investigations, there have been impeachments, criminal convictions, not to mention January 6th. None of it seemingly has mattered. He was reelected with more votes than ever, so maybe it's understandable why he won't take responsibility and why he's supporting his team, not firing them, even though his specialty used to be firing people. Trump is sort of like the wind chill factor. There's the actual temperature, and then there's how the temperature is perceived. With Trump, there's the actual scandal, and there's how it's perceived when it happens on his watch. Because many of his supporters feel that he's been treated unfairly by the press, by his opponents, and they tend to discount anything negative they hear about him, which leads us to the second reason that he may skate from this scandal, our polarized climate, including the media. The media has exploded in the 21st century, especially social media, which was barely a gleam in Mark Zuckerberg's eye just a generation ago. Good or bad, there used to be a common media, the mainstream media, if you like, that reported the news for everyone. But with information democratized, it's easier for people to do an end run around what were once regarded as authoritative voices. Individuals become their own gatekeepers. Just imagine if Richard Nixon had a conservative echo chamber in the 1970s, he might have survived Watergate. Unfortunately, this means many end up living in a media echo chamber, which can be a cozy place where threatening facts don't really get through. And it means both sides of the aisle have predetermined opinions, and the only scandals that register are those happening to the other side. Politicians, they know this and they play to it. Consider how anytime there's a controversy followed by a congressional hearing, each side just suits up in their usual armor. That was the case in the Senate on Tuesday, the House on Wednesday. Democrats probed for information on Signalgate. No Republican dared address the controversy. Just like Senate confirmation hearings for SCOTUS nominees, the party of the president highlights the attributes of the nominee's CV while the opposition party looks for blood, each revealing that their true allegiance is to their party, not to the Constitution, much less the country. The combination of these factors has upset my Watergate/Whitewater paradigm. We all know what went on here. We've read the back and forth in a level of detail that should never have been public, much less shared with a journalist in real time. But it's doubtful that minds will change even if they didn't tell it early, tell it all, and tell it themselves.